Alright everyone, we are getting back to basics with this video. I'm calling this one How to Even Out Volume Levels When Mixing Audio or Music. And the reason I title it that is because if I was brand new to mixing audio, I wouldn't necessarily know what a compressor is, so I wouldn't know to search for one. I would probably type that into Google. So let's hope and welcome the newbies to audio engineering. So first of all, I'm going to be talking about how to do this with a plugin called FabFilter Pro C2. And the reason I chose this particular plugin is because it is very versatile, and more importantly, it gives visual feedback that other plugins don't, so you can see what's going on. Now there's two ways to even out volume levels. The first way, the basic way, is to create a volume envelope, and we're going to do, see how it says volume, track envelopes. So let's say we had a piece of audio. I could add a point. I'm holding shift, clicking, and that adds a point, and then I'll add another point, and I'll add two more points, so that what happens is in the middle here I can click and drag up, and that increases the volume level for this section, and it fades up, so it's not such a sudden change in volume. And that's how you do it, and you so on, you change the audio that way. The second way is use of something called a compressor. It's the faster way. Some would say the easier way. I would say the preferred way. Now obviously I still will do volume envelopes when mixing, but a compressor is what this video is all about. Now why would we want to even out the volume levels? Because the goal of most music mixes, or really any audio mix, is to be able to hear every single note or lyric or word of a song when everything is blended together. Without compression, achieving a great mix is very difficult. You'll be automating until your eyes, which is what I was just doing, it's called automating. You'll be automating until your eyes bleed from staring at your computer monitor. I don't think you want that, do you? First things first, let's not confuse audio compression with data compression. Data compression is when parts of audio are removed to reduce file size. MP3, OGG, AAC, as well as FLAC, ALAC are types of data compression formats. Audio compression has nothing to do with data compression, but the two are often confused, including in a big video, which I'm not remembering the name of right now, but it was a video that was released by Harman Industries or Harman Audio or whatever they're called. Harman is a huge audio company, and they put out a video that confuses data compression with audio compression, and I was shaking my head, slapping myself in the forehead, and yeah, so hopefully someone who makes that documentary, they would have been better off watching this video before putting out that and confusing people even more. So I had to address that at the very beginning. Despite how basic that information is, it gets confused all the time. Besides individual tracks or channels, compressors are also used on complete mixes or tracks that are grouped together, also known as bussed together. If done properly, this results in a sound that is more cohesive or musical than when the tracks are processed separately. In a nutshell, compression is a process in which louder audio signals are brought down in level. That process is known as gain reduction. When this happens, the quieter, unaffected audio signal is made closer in volume to the formerly loud signals. Compression can also be used as an effect to get an instrument to sound louder and more in your face, as well as to soften transients or sustain an instrument. Compression can be applied while recording, mixing, or mastering. Compression isn't always a good thing though. It can lead to a loss of punch or musicality, life, whatever you want to call it, when done improperly, and you lose a sense of space or depth when abusing it too much. If you've seen my videos on the loudness war, That's exactly what's going on. Hypercompression is a term we use. Overdoing it. If everything sounds flat and or distorted, that flat out sucks. Pun intended. Also, low-level details are brought up in volume if you overdo compression, and that makes your track sound noisier. So, to visualize compression, let's take a look at a raw snare drum track before and after compression. Okay, so the top track is unprocessed, uncompressed, and then the bottom track is the processed track. If you're brand new to audio, you might not know what we're looking at here. Basically, the lines, the width of the lines represent a waveform, and they represent signal level. They don't necessarily represent loudness, but they do represent signal level, and the thicker or the wider the line, so up and down, the wider they are, the louder they are usually. The bottom track, as you can see the variations, see how dynamic, it's called dynamic, how the variations of the different signal strengths. So this one's loud, this one's quieter than that one, this one's a little bit louder. And then if we look at the bottom track, those variations are a lot less. And this is the exact same time of hit. And look how much even these tracks are to each other. That's what compression does. And these are the settings that I use to get that different compression. A very hard knee, almost 6-to-1 ratio, very fast attack, very fast release. And yeah. So let's talk about compressors and their controls. Compressors vary from simple 2-knob configurations like this classic LA2A emulation, where the only 2 knobs are peak reduction and gain, makeup gain, to very complex compressor plugins that have virtually limitless tweakability, such as this DC 8C plugin. But for this video, I'm going to be using the FabFilter Pro C2 plugin, like I said earlier, and that's because it has that visual feedback, so we can see exactly what's going on. Okay, so let me bring up the visual feedback by hitting the display, and I'm going to talk about the threshold control first of all. The threshold is where you set the point at which the compressor kicks in. So let me show you guys as I bring this up and down. You see how that line's going up and down? And more so, we're looking at not the brighter line here, but you see the cross section? You see these dotted lines? Watch those go up and down. That is the threshold control. You set this using your ear along with watching the gain reduction meter, which is over here in the middle. The lower the threshold, the more gain reduction you have. Typically, you only want to lower the threshold to the point where your track, and this is a scientific term, turns to shit. Then you dial it back a little bit until it no longer sounds bad. The better quality your compressor, usually the more you can lower the threshold and get more gain reduction before your audio sounds terrible. And that's one thing that I like about this particular plugin, is that it sounds great. It really does sound great, and like I said earlier, one of the main goals of compression is so that you can hear every note or lyric clearly, and ideally you want that to be heard without any artifacts, distortion, just things sounding bad, and this compressor certainly delivers. The next major control is ratio, and this is the quote how much unquote control. So you see what that does to the line? As we go to 1-to-1, we're getting no compression at all, and as we start to lower it, that's what's going on. So we can visualize what's actually going on with ratio. What I've done is taken the exact same snare track, and I'll play this for you right now. And I've changed the ratio on each one of these tracks below. So for this first one, we have a 2-to-1 ratio, which means that for every 2 decibels above the threshold, we're only going to get 1 decibel out of it. And then underneath that, we have a 4-to-1 ratio, and you see how the lines keep going down? You see how wide it is here, and then it's less wide down here? That's because for every time the signal is, again, a 4-to-1 ratio would be for every 4 decibels above the threshold, we only get 1 decibel back. And that goes for any type of signal. So if we have 0.5 decibels over the threshold, it's going to split that up. And then the bottom track here is 8-to-1. And I'll go back to the very beginning here. So this is the original track. See how thick those, not thick, but how wide those lines are. And then as we go down with higher ratios, those lines get a lot less wide. Pro C2 has this unique feature that I've never seen on other plugins called range. This range control actually lets you set how much gain reduction you can get, no matter what your ratio is set at, no matter how much your threshold knob is over. You can set it so that it never goes past a certain point. I think that is a huge boon to audio compression because, you know, once it gets past a certain amount of gain reduction, it sounds bad. So you can control that with the range knob. And now this is not available on most plugins. I don't even know if there's any other plugin that allows that, but that's a unique feature that, again, this is why I'm recommending this. Even for newbies, Pro C2 is a plugin that you can get now, and it will be good for your entire audio engineering career. Next up, we will talk about the attack and release knobs. Now, these are found on pretty much every compressor. Attack is the when to start control. When does the compressor begin to reduce gain once a signal crosses the threshold level? 1 millisecond afterwards? 10 milliseconds? Less than 1 millisecond? The larger the number, the slower it is to react. The smaller the number, the faster. So no transients at all get through. Now, you would think, well, if I'm trying to compress a signal, why would I want that initial sound to go through? Wouldn't I want it to go right away? And the answer is no, you don't always want it to go away, because music, when you take away that initial transient, that initial hit, it takes away the life. Like I said a bit earlier, if you overdo compression, it sounds bad. And this is where really experience and listening comes into play. You really want to adjust this so you let a little bit through, but not everything. Release is how long it takes for a signal to return to unity gain, also known as no gain reduction, after it passes the threshold. Now, again, this is terminology that's brand new to some of you guys. So basically imagine the signal is already past the threshold, it's underneath the threshold, and even though it's underneath the threshold after that initial grab from the compressor is still going to react to that initial signal. The release tells you how fast it returns to not being affected. And so we can visualize that. What I have here is, it's a tone that, let me show you the original one. Okay, so this is our original audio track. I'm going to turn this off, bypass it. Okay, so we have a very quick volume change. Down here we can see what release does. And I'll solo that so you can hear it. You see how the signal gets dropped down and then it gradually comes back up to the normal level. So what I've done is set the threshold so that it's not affecting this lower volume. Actually, it's this lower volume. So the threshold is set about right here. And then as soon as it goes over the threshold, the compressor reacts, but then it takes a little bit longer because see how this is a lower volume almost immediately? It takes longer for it to come back up and release the attack from the compressor. So to release the gain reduction. And actually I forgot to show you guys up here how attack. So this is our original signal. It goes from a quieter tone to a louder tone. And these are all different attacks. So you see how initially it lets a little bit of volume through. And here's our control. Our attack is immediate. So it doesn't really get much through. It still gets a little bit through because it's not like a 0 milliseconds attack. And then down here we have slower attacks. That's 30 milliseconds. And then that's the maximum attack time. And you can see how slow it is to react to that signal change. Again, this is the original track up here. A very quick change in volume. And then look how slow that is to even that out. Again, compressors are really something that you have to mess with yourself. It's all about what you hear and getting that signal to look good. And as long as everything's sounding fine, then you set it properly. And your goal is to even out the volume levels, but without making it sound bad. And we're lucky we live in an era where cheaper compressors back in the day, I would say they cost between $100 to $300 hardware compressors, and they weren't that good. They really weren't that good. This plugin, I think, cost, I don't even know what it costs, and actually the price will change depending on where you live. But this compressor in the United States is under $300, which was unheard of to have a compressor. I'm talking about Pro C, to have a compressor of this quality for under $300. Where your signal isn't affected that much and you can even out the levels. When people say this plugin's expensive, I always reference it to how things were, just 8 or 10 years ago. You couldn't get this level of quality for that price. And I know it's just software, but it's what you're able to do with the software, which is why the price is where it is. And really, it's more valuable than what they charge. I'm really happy with how cheap things are these days. All right, we just got a few more controls to go through. So the knee is this control. We have a hard knee, which is what this is set to right now, versus a soft knee. And you can watch right here at the corner here. Watch that change as I move the knob. Actually, I moved it way too fast. See how it starts arcing? And then it goes, it's really rounded, and then it becomes like a curve, like a very soft curve. Imagine this was a highway. Obviously, it'd be easier for us to drive around this corner or this curve versus have to slow down and then make a right. You know what I'm saying? But basically, the knee is defined as hard versus soft, and hard is a more immediate shift from unity gain, where you're not affecting anything, to gain reduction. So it's a lot less gradual. A super hard knee will be immediate. A hard setting is less transparent, but it gives you more of an effect to the sound, and so it makes your sound punchier. Soft is a cleaner sound and is typically used for vocals, and it's a more gradual change. All right, next up, our makeup gain. So again, when you bring down the level of audio, it's going to make the audio quieter. Obviously, when you bring down the louder levels, it's going to make the entire track sound like it's quieter. So we have over here the makeup gain, which you can either set automatically with that control, or disable it. And what I normally do is I see what my maximum gain reduction is and I bring it up. So let's say I have a maximum or peak gain reduction of 6 decibels. I'll change the makeup gain to positive or plus 6 decibels. Not every compressor has automatic makeup gain. It's actually pretty rare. So that's usually how I set it, based on the amount of gain reduction. Alright, our final control actually is not on the screen right now. It's called Sidechain. The Sidechain is something that is always on, whether you know it or not. And the main reason you want to control the sidechain is you might not want a signal affecting the compressor. And where would that come in handy? Well, if you have, let's say, a bass guitar, typically your low-level signals are louder, or a kick drum. Your low-level bass signals are going to be louder than the rest of the compressor. And that's going to affect the compressor in a negative way. Or if you're compressing a mix, you don't want to have the bass notes messing with the compressor. So what you would do is you would set the sidechain to ignore those. You would put a high pass filter or a low cut filter, as they call it, which tells the compressor, or the sidechain really, to ignore those lower frequencies. And like I said, this compressor is very flexible. I'm actually going to make this full screen. And you can see the sidechain. You can click this button called Audition and hear just what the sidechain is affecting. Or not affecting, I should say. And you click that button to turn it on. For this particular plugin, you should definitely read the manual, but the cool thing about it is you can just put your mouse over it and it'll tell you different things, like how to use it. Up in that bubble up top, you see that? Over here. I can't move it away, otherwise it goes away. Now you can also, this is where we get a little bit more complicated. I might do another video on this specifically, but we can change this setting to an external sidechain. And what that means is, let me get out of full screen mode here. What that means is we would have a signal that's not on the track. So let's say we have a vocal. The vocal, or actually let's say we have a whole music track. This is where I was going with this. If we have a whole music track, and then we have a vocal track that affects the sidechain, the external sidechain, that means that instead of the music track being, we would set like the threshold control, the ratio, all that. Instead, we would be setting it to affect the vocal chain, and it affects the music chain instead. To make that a little bit simpler, if you ever heard a radio DJ talk while he has a music track playing, and all of a sudden that music track goes way down faster than a human can change it, that's a sidechain compressor. And then as soon as he or she stops talking, that music track starts coming up in level. That's because the sidechain's being affected. The radio DJ's talking is making that music track go down automatically with a compressor. Hey everybody, this is Adam for WRHR. Do you think my sidechain is sexy? Again, it's a little bit complicated, that's why I'm going to save it for another video, but basically if you want to get into more complex mixing, eventually you're going to have to learn what sidechain does. And one thing I like doing is have a kick drum sidechained to a bass guitar, so that every time the kick drum is in the signal, which is less than the bass guitar will go down in signal just a little bit, so that the kick drum is louder than the bass guitar, and it also makes the track sound more musical. It's kind of weird how that works, but it does work well. But again, that's a little bit more advanced stuff. but just for future reference, the sidechain is a control you can mess with. There are 3 more settings that are unique to Pro C2, and that is the look ahead, which you enable over here. Look ahead allows the compressor to see a signal before the sidechain sees it, so that you can get even cleaner signals. It also has oversampling. You can either do 2x or 4x, and oversampling again minimizes distortions, artifacts in the signal. It's basically a way to make your compression sound even cleaner if that's what you're going for. Look ahead, it also allows you to use this plugin as a brick wall limiter, which a limiter is a form of compression, but if you don't have a limiter plugin already, you can use this and dial up that look ahead and make things awesome, for lack of a better word. The final additional control that Pro C2 has is this over here called Hold, which is a companion to the release control. Basically what it does is it extends the time that the peak gain reduction is. So it prolongs the peak gain reduction. All these extra controls add to computer processing and latency, but on modern computers, that's not really a huge deal. The last thing I want to talk about is compressor types. Pro C2 has a bunch of them built in. So under style, this is compressor types: clean, classic, opto, vocal, mastering, bus, punch, and we have pumping. These are all different compressor types. The manual for FabFilter goes into this in a bit more detail, but basically different compressors sound different. Your LA2A sounds different from an 1176 hardware compressor, and that sounds different compared to a brick wall limiter, and that sounds different to a cheap hardware compressor that nobody should be using. All this stuff affects the way the signal sounds, and it's something to explore and experiment with and read more into in a more intermediate and advanced video, which I might not have out for a while, but you can look on other YouTube channels for different compressor types, but I'll get into that in another video. For now, I hope I didn't, bore you guys with all this information, but basically, like I said, it's very important that we hear an even amount of vocals. I hear it all the time on amateur recordings. It's something that there's like a web show that I listen to, and their audio is all over the place. The volume level is all over the place, and it's annoying. It's very annoying. If you live with somebody else, it can disturb them because all of a sudden, you set your level for this setting, and then all of a sudden somebody screams at the top of their lungs, and now you're sleeping on the couch because your girlfriend woke up and has to go to work early in the morning, or whatever. Keeping an even amount of volume without losing musicality is modern mixing, and you don't want to annoy your audience. And that's why we use compressors, because we pretty much have to. As I said in the very beginning of the video, without compressors, mixing audio is a much more difficult job, and I'm glad we have these tools out there now. Pro C2 is almost like cheating. But that's why I recommend this compressor, because if you're new to audio engineering, you can demo this for, I believe, 30 days. And then, like I said, remember that you used to not be able to get a compressor of this quality for less than $300 not too long ago. So if you're going to start somewhere, I would say start with Pro C2. You'll be using this plugin for the rest of the days that you mix audio. It's definitely on my to-buy list. By the way, I forgot to mention this entire audio track of my voiceover that you've been listening to the whole video has been processed with Pro C2. So this has been Adam for RealHomeRecording.com.